I've got Rhiannon Lloyd with me this morning, and I think my greatest challenge in talking to Rhiannon is that she has so much that she can share that I'm I'm challenged to try and get it into 35 minutes. But we're gonna have a go, aren't we, Rhiannon? Yeah, we're gonna have
Yes.
a go because you've got a long ministry and it's an international ministry, and so I think let's start by just if you can briefly introduce yourself, just so that people who don't know you can just get a sense of who you are. Can you?
Right. Well, I'm Rhiannon Lloyd, Dr. Rhiannon Lloyd, from Llandudno. Grew up in a little rural Welsh village on the shore of the Menai Straits. Graduated as a medical doctor and later as a psychiatrist, but then left medicine to focus on inner healing from a biblical standpoint, and then was totally unexpectedly led into an international reconciliation ministry.
Lovely, lovely. You know, we could go there. We could go to the International Reconciliation Ministry, but we're not going to, because the channel is What is God Doing in Wales? I've read your book, Fire Lilies, and I'm going to come back to that sort of towards the end. And it was refreshing to hear that you'd had challenges in your upbringing and in your teenage years. The reason I say that might sound odd, that it was refreshing to hear. Refreshing from the point of, I can relate to this. I can relate to the challenges that you experienced. And so that brought me a little bit of freedom. So, Rhiannon, because they're in the book, I'm comfortable to ask you to maybe share a couple of the negative experiences from your childhood and from growing up, and the effects that those had on you, and then how God used them to shape you into the person that you are and led you into the ministry. Am I okay to ask that?
Yeah, sure.
Go on then. Share with us a couple of your experiences.
Right. Well, I think maybe the first negative experience I was aware of was starting school at the age of 4 and having grown up knowing no English whatsoever, having to suddenly find myself in an English-speaking school, because at that time it was still illegal to be educated through the medium of Welsh. So, I was just totally out of my depth, and people were, it was just really hard. And coming from a language that was completely phonetic to the English language, which is very unphonetic and totally unpredictable. And I remember trying to read these English words phonetically, and of course getting it totally wrong, like tongue for tongue, and the whole class laughing, and so I think, and later in teen years, there was a lot of conflict between the English speaking and the Welsh speaking in school, and I remember being told, "You're inferior to us." My father says so. Words which actually impacted me for years, especially when I landed in Leeds to study medicine. That tape was playing, "You're inferior to us." And I almost left. I lost all my confidence then. So the other big thing that was negative was the degree of suffering that I encountered at home, in that I think maybe the first thing was becoming aware that my sister, who was 2 years younger, my only sibling, there was something wrong with her. She wasn't normal, and nobody could understand what it was. And we had a lot of trouble. She was very, very frustrated and disturbed and often violent. And the agencies were coming in. Sometimes she had to be hospitalized in Denbigh Mental Hospital because they didn't know what on earth to do with her except fill her with drugs, which made her like a zombie, So it was very hard. It was only in her late teens that she was first tested and was discovered to have a significant learning difficulty. She was very good verbally, but we didn't know that she didn't understand a lot of what she was saying. She was repeating things parrot fashion without understanding, So that was a very, very big challenge. And I was ashamed of having a disabled sister and the attention that she drew, the negative attention that she drew to us. And then when I was 11, my mother became seriously ill with very severe rheumatoid arthritis, and very soon was wheelchair bound and in severe pain daily. And I loved her dearly, and that was horrible to have to watch that. And then my father, well, I couldn't understand what was wrong there. I just knew that he was unable to relate in a personal way to any of us. A very clever man. I really didn't know if he loved us, any of us. Now I have no doubt that he loved us all dearly. And what I now have no doubt about at all is that he really was autistic and was unable to meet our personal needs. So I was the only one who was capable of being the fixer. You know, I was the Messiah, had the Messiah complex. I had to, I would call the doctor when there was a crisis. Okay, sit down, I'll make you all a cup of tea. I'll call the doctor. It was, so I grew up feeling I have to be there for everybody else, but there's nobody there for me. Yeah. But on the positive side, I think it gave me an understanding of suffering and a real heart for people who are suffering and a desire to see them healed. Probably why I went into medicine, because that was my identity. But it was a love-hate relationship in medicine. I loved being with people when they were in need and I could help them, but I hated having the responsibility. So I happily left medicine after 13 years. The other thing is that it gave me such an awareness of disability. And I think when I became a Christian at 16, I think I was so convicted by God then of my attitude to my sister Gwenda. And it was just such a joy to me some years later to discover a letter my mother had written to my aunt and uncle, who were true believers, the only ones really in the family at that time. And she said, I know now that something real has happened to Rhiannon because she now loves her sister Gwenda.
Beautiful,
so,
beautiful.
So I was then, through Gwenda, introduced to a whole world of people with various disabilities. And I think what that gave me was a sensitivity, especially in communication, of speaking clearly and using vocabulary that would be clearly understood, speaking simply and clearly. So I think that was a very helpful skill that I picked up because of my experience with Gwenda.
As I listen to your story, and the trauma that you've shared with us in your childhood, there was a lot of emotional, mental trauma, really, of your situation. I'm just reflecting, and I have read the book, but I'm hearing it clearly again, how in the midst of all those challenges and that trauma that you experienced as a child, yet God has been able to redeem you from that.
Yes.
And taken that experience, really, delivered you, given you freedom from that experience, and brought you to a place where you are now ministering out of what you have learned, out of what you have experienced in God. So tell us a little bit about that, how that sort of journey and how that shaped your ministry and the ministry that you're involved in now. Can you?
Yes, well, I think I had a deep desire in my heart that every ethnic group, that the different ethnic groups in the world would see the beauty in each other. So that was something that was a passion for me, that I wanted us to discover the beauty in each other's ethnicity, and so that it would become a blessing and an enrichment instead of a threat.
Because that's what you'd experienced. Yes. You had experienced the very negative effect of,
yes.
Yeah.
So I really, I know somebody asked me a few years ago when I was doing the reconciliation ministry, what's the real deep desire of my heart, of your heart? And I remember answering, I want Jesus to be able to come back to a healed, whole bride, a beautiful bride, not a bride that's full of fractures and disease and unhealed wounds. So I think maybe that was a big passion, the underlying passion in what I was doing.
Lovely, lovely.
And of course, the other one was to see people healed of any inner wounds. I needed a lot of healing. And I thank God for time that I spent with you through the mission, YWAM, where I was able to bring so many of these wounds out and to really receive a very deep healing from God. I could never have done the work I did later had I not gone through that. Yeah. So it was such a heart desire that others would know the same healing.
Lovely.
Would be able to deal with the baggage that they were carrying. And we all carry baggage because we are living in a very fallen, dysfunctional world, a very broken world. And so we're all carrying different baggage, which can get in the way of the ministry that we want to do. So that was also something that was a real passion, that once we had trained reconciliation teams in different countries, I wanted to invest in them to make sure that they dealt with any baggage they were carrying. So I held retreats for regular retreats for some of our workers, and that was such a joy to do that and to see people receiving much greater freedom in their own being and a freedom to relate more intimately with God, because I felt that was their greatest need. And so often these wounds stop us from relating closely to God, which is why it's so important to deal with them.
I can certainly relate to what you're sharing, not necessarily the exact experiences of childhood, obviously, but being left with baggage, being left with emotional and mental hurts coming into teenage years and adult years. The Christian life is about not coming to Jesus as a finished product, coming to Jesus as a broken product. And then the Christian life is then a journey towards freedom. And we're all on this journey. We haven't finished the journey, because we'll only finish the journey when we look like Jesus.
That's right.
So, and I don't think any of us do it yet anyway. And so we're still on this journey. Yeah. And I don't want to go into the international side of things, okay? Because I want to hear your heart for Wales. But just so that the viewers can have an idea of the international ministry that Rhiannon has, in that I think you've personally ministered, Rhiannon, in 19 countries throughout the world, haven't you? And that's a personal. You've been to these countries, and there's your workshops going on in 34 countries worldwide. And then you've created 40 teams worldwide, which bring this reconciliation ministry, 8 in Rwanda and 4 in Ethiopia. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. I'm deliberately not going there because we could spend at least 2 hours there. But just to give people a sense of, this is the international ministry that you have. But now, the good news for us here in Wales is the Lord is turning your heart towards Wales. What would you say is the calling now that you have on your heart for Wales, that I suspect you haven't had so strong throughout your ministry? But you're feeling this real sense of calling towards Wales now. So
yes, to be honest, I had lost all hope for Wales, especially Welsh-speaking Wales. I'd seen the glory of God, especially in Africa and in other countries, other parts of the world. I'd seen the Holy Spirit work powerfully, and I was sad coming back to Wales because I felt we are a God-forsaken nation. Really, that's what I felt, and I felt, well, we're in decline, you know, everything's in decline, the language and culture's in decline, certainly Christianity in Welsh-speaking Wales is in decline. It seems God is only blessing the English. Probably he thinks we've had our chance and we've turned our backs on it, and you know, so I really didn't have hope. But there was a desire, a deep desire in my heart, that especially the youth in Welsh-speaking Wales would have a chance to hear that there is a living God who is working wonders in other places. I wanted them to know there was a God who was alive and well, and that he could do the same in Wales as he was doing in other places. The hope that he would do that was a bit low. But I think through attending the Welsh festival Llanw, I started to get hope, because it was full of young people. And they're people who really loved Jesus passionately. And so that's when I started to get hope that maybe there was a future for Wales. And something that happens at the end of our workshops, after we've looked at all the negatives and the hatred and the prejudice and everything else, is we have a time, having been reconciled, where we bless one another as different ethnic groups. And Wales has been blessed by so many different countries now all over the world. And people have said to me, go home and bless your own country. So
you're being sent home?
Yes, I'm very happy now. I think I'm done with international travel. I used to find airports and aircraft very exciting, but that's well worn off now. So I'm hopefully have retired from actually being physically in other countries, although I'm still involved in Zoom in some way. But now, I mean, I would like, what I found out in Llanw was that there were many young leaders being raised up now to start small fellowships outside the traditional church often. And that was so exciting. And I found I have the same desire as I had with my teams, for example, in the middle of civil war in Congo, that I wanted to invest in the new leaders coming up. I wanted to help them to find healing for any inner wounds they might have and deal with their baggage. So it was a big thrill for me when I was invited to share in a ministry called Derwen, which is investing in these young leaders. So that's something that I feel passionate about. But of course, I have actually run 5, I think, workshops in Wales, in a Welsh setting, which was a big challenge for me, because I usually try to walk a very neutral path when I run workshops, so I'm not taking sides with anyone. And that was very hard for me to do in Wales, especially if I heard some wounding words being said by the non-Welsh speaking people, which I knew was wounding the Welsh speaking people even further. And trying to see that everyone's pain was valid. So that was a challenge for me, to have to step back and accept that everyone in Wales was wounded one way or another, and everyone has been robbed. Jesus spoke very clearly about the thief in John 10:10, the thief who has come to rob, kill, and destroy. And all the groupings in Wales have been robbed of something, not all in the same way, but something that really took me aback was I remember in one of the workshops particularly, I think this one was held in Faldebrenin, when it became clear that all the people groups in Wales were asking for one thing, one main theme, and that was to be able to feel that this was really their home. And everyone
Lovely.
lost that. Everyone.
Mm.
What helped me is that God had taken me personally through a journey of healing.
Yes.
Of my Welshness.
Yes.
Of receiving prayer. Well, first of all, I think in Leeds, in university, of meeting lovely English Christians. And I'd grown up hearing my father saying, oh, they're all the same, you know, there was no good English person, you know, they're all empire builders, arrogant, who don't care about anybody else's culture, etc. But discovering that this wasn't true, they weren't all the same. They were beautiful English friends, and I made deep friendships, which are still there today. And I had to repent of prejudice, of strong prejudice against the English. So that
we've all had to, haven't we? We've all had to.
Yes, and then because prejudice says they're all the same, and they're not. That's wrong. That's passing judgment on a whole group, which is very serious.
Yes.
So yes. So, but there was healing times when English people prayed for me against wounding words that I'd heard, like "you're inferior to us." So, and times in the Lydia intercession movement, a women's intercession movement, of dealing with some historical injustices. Like I remember dealing with Cyflafan Morfan Rhuddlan, the massacre that took place in front of the castle in Rhuddlan, very close to where I was living. Because in the past, there were battles when the English castles in Wales and ruled us from the castles, and the Welsh would try to take back the castles, but we never came off well. And in the end, we stopped fighting outwardly. The fighting was all inward. So we dealt with stuff like that, asking forgiveness for innocent blood shed on both sides, and stuff like that. That was very helpful. But I think something that was very meaningful for me was when a lady asked forgiveness. An English lady, actually, she was living in Bristol at the time, and she crossed over. She came across the border to a meeting we were holding as Lydia in Swansea, and she said she had come specifically and she knelt at my feet and she said, I've come to offer you the servant heart of an English handmaiden.
Wow. Yes. I've heard you share that. Yeah.
No idea what on earth she was on about. And she said, well, I know you won't understand, because in all our history, we were the masters and you were the servants. And that broke something in me, and I started to sob. And it was the pain, not just my pain at all. I felt it was the pain of generations of my people who have always felt that way, felt inferior. And she was weeping, and she started to list some of the historical injustices that she had just been researching. And that meant so much. I thought, she knows, she understands. She understands. And something really changed in my heart that day. And I was able to forgive the history of Wales, of English in England in Wales. And of course, it's forgiveness is 70 times 7, isn't it? It's a lifestyle. We have to keep on forgiving, because there are things still that wound us, aren't there, as Welsh-speaking people. So it's a challenge that forgiveness then becomes a lifestyle. And the healed identity, I think, for me, was a revelation of being a citizen of the holy nation that we're talked about. It's talked about in the Bible, for example, in 1 Peter 2, verse 9. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. And realizing that as a believer, I was part of a new supernatural nation made up from every tribe and tongue, where we are all of equal value, and we all have some treasure that we can share with each other to enrich the whole holy nation. So that was very healing for me. And has been there. And that's what I want to happen in Wales. I want all the people groups in Wales to take on their higher identity, which includes the natural identity, where they are perfect. No one then needs to feel second class or in any way. No one needs to feel unwelcomed. We're all equally valued and respected and celebrated in God's holy nation. So that's my desire for Wales, that they will discover that.
Lovely, lovely. In listening to you, I think what I'm seeing is that because your identity is Welsh, because there was a lot of trauma there surrounding the Welsh English sort of situation, and you grew up with that. I think that now is the time that you're ready to come back to Wales. Not that you've not previously been equipped to come back to Wales, because you have been, because you've got this international ministry, but you've been too close to it up until this time now.
I think, though, that the main thing is that I now have faith for Wales, and I think it's a value in our ministry that we have to have faith for whichever situation we go into. If we don't have faith and hope that God can radically work there, then we shouldn't be going. Because one of our main callings in our ministry is to be hope bearers. And I couldn't do it in Wales because I didn't have that hope. And it's amazing. I've only just really retired from the international ministry. I think my last trip abroad was in November, and I hope that's over now. And it's really since then, in the past couple of months, really, that God has opened my eyes to see that He is at work in Wales today, and given me a faith that God is going to do something here. And it was listening to a sermon by Simeon Baker in Llanilltyd Fawr recently, and he was speaking about Elijah on Mount Carmel, and he says to Ahab, while there was still famine and drought, he said to Ahab, "I hear the sound of heavy rain." Now, that's the first time something just hit me. I was just moved to tears, and I thought, Cymru, Wales, that's us. And I've never felt that before. I've never felt it before. And then it goes on to speak about Elijah's servant saying, "Oh, I've seen a small cloud, only as big as a man's fist." And since then, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing those small clouds all over the place. And I've got faith for Wales now. And I think that's the biggest way that was the big block that was meant it was hard for me to work in Wales before. Whereas now I feel, no, I'm ready. And I've seen it recently in running a workshop recently in Cardiff. I've seen the Holy Spirit break in. So that's given me faith for Wales, which I think was the biggest preparation.
As Welsh-speaking Christians, it's a very exciting time in Wales, because there's you carry that sense of hope, you carry that sense of faith. I carry that sense of hope and faith. It's an exciting time to be a Welsh first language Welsh speaker in Wales, and so many listening to this will share that as well. But let me ask you about the book. The title of your book is Fire Lilies, and I've read your book and thoroughly enjoyed your book. And you took us on that journey of your childhood, which we're not able to sort of fully delve into that in this video, even though we've touched on it. Tell us a little bit about your book. What caused you to write it, and that's a little bit of an open question, so we may be here for another.
Well, I had no plan to write a book. That's the truth. Okay. And I thought, well, if I ever did write a book, it's definitely not to be about me. I can write about the heroes that I've met, those who have embraced the message of reconciliation, even in life-threatening situations, and have run with it at great cost. I'll write about them, but I'm definitely not writing anything about me. And I was in America in a Christian conference, and a young man came up to me who didn't know anything at all about me. And he said, God is highlighting your hands to me. And I believe he is saying there are stories in you that the world needs to hear. So get writing. That was several years ago, and it still took COVID to make me actually get down to it and write. But by this time, I had an advisory covering group, and they were saying, one day this needs to be written, but not yet, because you've got young fledgling teams, and we don't want to put them in a vulnerable position by making them known internationally at this stage. And so just before COVID, they said, we believe the time is for you to start writing now. And then lockdown, it was during lockdown really that I wrote the book. And they said to me, you've got to write about you, because God used you, and it would be so good that you wrote how God prepared you, even though you hadn't a clue at the time that you were being prepared for anything. And really, my book is the story of how God is able to lead someone who hasn't a clue they're being led. And I've never had supernatural guidance. I know a lot of Christians get very hung up about that. But I'm so impressed with the way God gets us where he wants us to be, even though at the time we may not have a clue ourselves. So I remember once when I'd started this international ministry, and I was seeing people who'd hated each other becoming bosom friends and working together. I mean, that was such an incredible joy. And I remember saying, God, this fits me. This fits me. And I felt God was saying, yes, Rhiannon, I know your size. So he gave me something that fitted me. And I think he wants to do that with all of us. I think now that God had started preparing us before we were born, giving us the particular giftings and personality that we have, and that he has some unique work for all of us to do, really. There's something that we can contribute that no one else can in exactly the same way. And that every ethnic group can as well, can contribute that others can't.
Yeah. This video is not about the book. This is about you. It's about your ministry. But the video wouldn't be whole, wouldn't be complete without me mentioning the book. And I will put details on as to where people can get a hold of a copy. But just having read the book, I would recommend it, because you say, you didn't want to write a book about you. Well, you haven't written a book about you, because what you've written about your background, your upbringing, which is absolutely essential in understanding the full story of how you ended up, or how God led you to where he led you. And you do talk about the heroes of the people whom you've met and who've been hurt badly and have come to reconciliation and have come to start up teams, etc. So it's definitely not a book about you, Rhiannon, having read it. You'll be pleased to know.
I didn't want anyone to put me on a pedestal. I didn't want anyone to read the book and say, what an amazing person. I wanted them to read the book and say, what an amazing God.
And that's what's happened. That's what's happened. That's how I've read the book as well. So
I'm glad to hear that.
Rhiannon, I think we've done well to cover so many different things in the time that we've got. I'm going to give you the last word as far as, is there anything that is on your heart that you would like to share that I haven't asked you about, or that in thinking about this conversation beforehand that you thought, I'd really like to share that? Is there anything? If not, it's not a problem. You don't have to think of something.
what I want to say is that I believe God enjoys using ordinary people. It's not any special people, it's ordinary people, which gets out, comes out clearly. Not many, all the not many noble, not many, because when God uses ordinary people, he gets the glory then. And I just want to give hope to anybody listening that God can use you. If he could use me, and I had a lot of hang-ups, and I didn't get everything right at the beginning at all, and I'm still learning. And I just want you to know that there's hope. Just be available. Just walk through the doors that God opens for you, and you'll be surprised where they lead. And nobody is more surprised than me looking back of what God has opened up for me, and he can do the same with you, whoever you are.
Amen. I'll put the scripture reference up for that. I think it's 1 Corinthians 1 to 26, something like that, but I'll put the reference for it so that people can reflect on that, because if he didn't choose those that weren't noble, those that weren't wise in the eyes, if he did, we'd have no hope, would we?
No.
And so we're so grateful and thankful to him that he does use the ordinary, and those who are broken start off broken.
Yes,
he mends for his glory.
Yeah,
lovely. Rhiannon, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, bob bendith. God bless you. And we'll be in touch. We'll I think there's another one. There's another one of these to come. And I'm not limiting to another one, but for now, really appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, Rhiannon. God bless. Bye-bye.
Croeso. Welcome.